Caution. This work contains explicit content, heavy topics, and vulgar language not suitable for those under the age of 15. Precaution is advised. All content shown in this video, including music, artwork, and story, are made by TristenValkrien and will not be distributed or used without consent. I wish you a pleasant listening experience. Julie and Henry, am I not mistaken? Bernhardt called out behind them. Julie and Henry turned around in surprise and nodded, confused and stunned. They awkwardly grinned while holding out their hands to introduce themselves to Bernhardt. "That is us. Can we help you?" Henry asked respectfully as he firmly shook Bernhardt's hand. Bernhardt exchanged glances with the young couple and took note of Julie's blonde hair and her unique grin before he replied, "No, I just wanted to introduce myself. As I am aware, this fine young lady," Julie bowed politely before Bernhardt continued, "has won a position next to the Queen." Bernhardt smirked. Julie shook her head and noted that she was only there to help. "I did not win anything, good sir. We just offered an..." Julie clicked her tongue and side-eyed Henry and Bernhardt, hinting them to be secretive. Bernhardt smiled politely and remarked with a chuckle, "Ah, yes, right. We mustn't forget the king's demands." Henry and Julie exchanged awkward glances in return before Henry gestured with his hand that they needed to leave. "Pleasure meeting you, Sir Bernhardt. I hope our meeting will be fortuitous." Julie waved Bernhardt goodbye before she and Henry turned around and walked away. His smile quickly disappeared as he watched the two silhouettes disappear down the street, leaving him standing alone in front of the royal estate. "Julie and Henry," he mumbled to himself as he sucked air in through his teeth. "Oh, to be young," he added as he exhaled and looked up towards the window on the second floor of the estate. The image of the young girl flashed through his mind as he reminded himself why he was here in the first place. He exhaled and rubbed his hands together, trying to warm himself up as the sun began to set and the cold air began to breeze through. "I need a drink." Reynold. Dusk had settled, casting a soft orange hue across the horizon while the animals all began to rest. Reynold took off his coat and gloves as he prepared for bed. With a deep sigh, he glanced at himself through the mirror in front of him. He shook his head repulsively and asked himself, Why must it be?" Yet no answer came forth from the silhouette in the mirror, only a dull expression that mimicked his own. "Why?" he asked himself yet again. But before he could ask again, a soft, bony hand ran up his back towards his neck before wrapping around his chest. A soft hum filled the silence in his left ear. He looked down towards the hand and kissed it gently. It was Marion, the woman that he loved like no other, pulled him out of his thoughts, bringing him back to reality. "Go to sleep, Reynold. It's late," she said softly as she placed her chin on his shoulder, gently rubbing her hand across his arm as she glanced towards him through the mirror. Reynold glanced down towards her hand and said in a soft, groany voice, "I do not know what to make of it, Marion. I feel betrayed by my own folk, the people I thought were kind and understanding." His voice was filled with sorrow as he glanced down towards her hands. Marion shook her head and replied, "Reynold, people are easily fooled. It's like presenting a mirror to a deer. It is obvious to keen eyes, but not those who speak without thoughts yet." Marion paused, kissing his cheek before she continued. But that does not mean you can hurt yourself because of them. I love you. The children will you. That is the only thing that counts. Do not fear the words they speak, or the actions they may wrap themselves in. It will only humor them more. Marian wrapped her arms around his waist, and unhappy fighting. Do not worry about the things you can't change, she said softly. Reynold looked back up towards his reflection and sighed. You are right, Marian. He turned around and hugged her tightly. You are right. Julie, Celebrations and Fear. As the cold night had drowned the world into darkness, there was one house that remained lit, bright, with overwhelming joy and gratitude. Oh, Julie, we are truly blessed, Henry yelled loudly as he picked up Julie by the waist and twirled her around, making Julie snicker and giggle as she kissed Henry on the cheek. No more living off of 4 coins a day, Henry spoke again, putting Julie down before he raised his arms up in the air. Yet Julie did not share the same sentiment at that moment. But we haven't gotten a letter from the king yet. Her voice sounded apprehensive and timid. She averted her eyes from Henry's, but Henry shook his head in denial and remarked, But the queen did. She allowed you to, so the chance is high that it is also true. His voice sounded sincere and soft as he reassured her. He raised his arms and placed his hands on both sides of her face, guiding her eyes back towards him. No need to sulk, my love. Be confident. Be happy. This is what we were promised. Julie lowered her gaze and placed her hand onto Henry's wrist, asking, Are you sure? Then, in a split second, before she could even comprehend what was happening, she felt a soft and delicate kiss on her lips. The kiss felt delicate and sweet, something that she hasn't experienced in her entire life. I am always sure. That is why I chose you too, Henry then said softly, before he released his embrace and stood back up. But he pointed with his finger towards her. Tomorrow you have to present yourself in front of the queen. There is no need to wait, all right? Julie nodded and gave a soft, genuine smile in return. Henry returned the gesture before asking, But I am still starving for your star cakes. Julie chuckled and stood up, giving Henry a quick embrace before she poked his nose and said, I'll make one just for you, my prince. It was a hot summer noon. The city had gathered in masses in the Colosseum of Osiris, all wanting to voice their concerns and demands. The Colosseum was densely crowded. They pushed and battered each other, trying to push themselves towards the front. As the chaotic entanglement of voices reverberated along walls of the Colosseum, the folks began protesting for their demands. Reynold, being the one that announced this gathering, just stood in pure shock as he watched them tug at each other's throat like starving dogs fighting over a slab of meat. Silence, the king announced, trying to diffuse the situation in an orderly fashion, yet his voice was unheard under the sounds of anger. Silence, at once, the king yelled again, clapping his hands together as he tried to diffuse the situation once again. But still, the people did not adhere to his call. My God, he whispered to himself with his eyes closed. He took a deep sigh before he yelled loud and stern, Quiet, or I will have you imprisoned for civil disturbance. His throat began to ache with pain as it echoed throughout the Colosseum. The sounds of chatter and fighting began to finally die down as their attention turned towards Reynold in annoyance and dismay. Reynold raised his hand in the air as he waited for the crowd to fully simmer down in silence. He lowered his hands as silence began filling the musty air of sweat and filth. He then took a deep breath. Clasping his hands together, he said with a stern voice,
"I have heard your voices concerning my children's appearance. For this, I have announced this gathering to discuss on the matters, like civilized folk,"
Reynold said as he glanced around calmly. He could hear some people murmur under their breath. He then continued.
"As all of you are aware,"
he shortly paused before continuing again,
"I am a man of my word. I listen with both my ears and eyes. I have sought to bring justice to what my father had done to the Etherean citizens. His cruel ways of killing for sport has ended. Yet I see that many do not share the same sentiment as I. I understand that Valazar still lingers somewhere. But,"
he said as he raised a finger in the air, trying to convey a pledge that he will not divert from,
"no one has the right to decide that my child should be hanged or burned purely because she has pure white skin and core I am consulting. As a father, I am heavily disappointed."
He gritted his teeth as he glanced around once more, seeing the frustrated expressions on the faces of some people. "And as a mother, I do not want my child to be subject to abject horrors of Veloz's creations. I counting bear the sight of it. If not us, then surely someone will do it themselves." A woman spoke in concern, dressed in loose, baggy clothing with a bronze belt around her waist. The king glanced in surprise towards her and answered with a stern and furious tone.
"Can you hear yourself right now? You'd rather have my child dead than having yours beside mine. Either way, any and all that dares to take the blade to my daughter's throat will be subject to agonizing punishment."
The crowd began to murmur in disgust as they heavily disliked the king's response.
"Send me to the gallows instead then. I want that child gone before chaos will engulf this city whole."
A man dressed in fancy silk and gold stated with a pensive tone. The king chuckled. With squinting eyes, he replied,
"I recognize you."
The crowd all began to eye towards the nobleman in question, while the king pointed his finger towards him.
"Yes."
The king squinted his eyes.
"You forced yourself on a girl once before, did you not?" "Yes, in the time of my father's rule. It's not surprising that such filth comes out of your mouth,"
the king remarked in retaliation. The nobleman scoffed in disgust, trying to deny the accusation as he glanced around, trying to convince other people that it was not true.
"That is ridiculous. To make such disgusting remarks on my name is blasphemy."
The king chuckled. The king shook his head subtly.
"Many forgot, but I don't. I know my folks like my own blood. Merle of Tamarie."
Merle stared in confusion, as he did not know how the king knew of his name. Merle tried to speak, but none of it came out due to his own incompetence.
"But..."
The king clasped his hands behind his back and continued.
"The gallows have reserved a special place just for you,"
the king said as he watched Merle quickly disappear amongst the crowd.
"Now," the king continued, "if there are any other lingering questions that need to be answered at this moment, now is your time."
The king watched as a wave of hands raised up in the air. People were shouting and begging to be chosen as they waited for the king to point them out. Reynold glanced around with much patience, trying to look for the ones that were moderate enough not to scream and shout.
"You," the king announced as he pointed his finger towards a young merchant dressed in cloth that was filled with filth and dirt. The young boy pointed towards himself, questioning if he was talking to him. Reynold nodded in response. "Speak up, my child. What is your question?"
The young boy glanced around in hesitance, feeling the gaze of 1,000 souls staring down upon him with dismay. With a deep sigh, he mustered up all of his courage and asked, "What would she think of herself if she finds out that all see her as a monster, a disease that we wanted to get rid of?" The king stared in silence, not knowing what to say. He knew that if La Rose would ever find out that people wanted her gone the second she was born, that only she would resort to hurting herself, or worse.
"She will not. I put my faith upon that," Reynold said, hoping that she would never come to know of it. Even if he were successful in hiding the truth, it wouldn't last long. The longer she roams Helia, the more it would be uncovered by time itself. "Next," the king announced loudly with a sigh. He glanced around. He noticed that fewer hands were held up in the air as the people had grown impatient and distrustful of the king. He let out a breath of frustration before he chose his next one. "You, the girl with the braids," the king announced towards his right, pointing towards a somewhat older girl with stark blue eyes, dressed in blue and white cloth adorned by lacings of flowers and lilies. The girl shone an innocent glance up towards the king in surprise and asked in a delicate voice, "We may show concern regarding La Rose, but what of Luxia? Once she grows older, she may question why some ask where her sister is. If the case would be that you are in favor of the opposition's demands." The king brushed his beard before he answered. "That I don't know. It is too far to predict what she would do. But she would never hurt a soul," the king pressed.
He nodded subtly. "Even if she raises a sword to her own kin." A frail voice spoke suddenly. The king glanced towards the origin and saw a frail elderly man, dressed in tattered cloth, standing ominously in the center, surrounded by men dressed in robes of black and red.
"It would be out of the question. My daughter will never come to think of it."
The elderly man chuckled as he raised his hand. "The blood of the old god never ceases its intended purpose. Tales of old have always shown how it ends." The elderly man spoke with a trembled voice. It was almost like his body could disintegrate any second.
"Tales from a deceased bard, you mean?"
The king scoffed as he dejected his remarks. The elderly man shook his head. The crowd watched the confrontation intently as it went on. "So it may be, my lord. But I am an old man. I've been witness to many countless battles and wars, and I know when the foundation has been set for another," he warned. His tone sounded stern this time, while Reynold stared into his dead, sunken eyes.
"One more word and it—"
Just before Reynold could finish his sentence, the man shook his head and replied with a chuckle. "Spare the words, my lord. Time has already met its end for me. But your daughter is now the subject of Veloza and Emir." King stared in contempt as he watched the frail man turn and walked away with his pawns. Reynold bit his lip in frustration. Through the last words the old man spoke of, stuck to him like a plague running amok. What does he mean with that? "Fuck," the king said under his breath as he glanced around.
"So, you think the tale is a joke?"
a fairly sized woman asked curiously with a frown. The king turned his gaze towards the woman and shook his head. But before he could say anything, another person interjected and remarked, "But you said that you'd listen to us." Ranald opened his mouth to speak, but yet again, another voice interjected. "Blasphemy! To deject the truth is a sin." Then another one spoke, this time targeting the other person. "A sin? You think putting a child on a spike because of a belief is the right call?" Another person scoffed and replied, "It's the way it should be, to prevent a return of evil. It is how the gods wanted it." Soon, the crowd began to erupt in anger and madness. Ranald could only watch as the chaos soon began to resurface. This was a mistake, Ranald thought to himself, while he watched people tug and pull at each other's hair like animals. He turned and gestured with his hands for the guards to handle the matter while walking away. The sounds of people clashing together faded out as he entered the lower halls. He then stood still. All the while, guards and knights began to run past him up the stairs into the Colosseum, the metal plates clashing and echoing through the halls with each step. He placed his hands on his forehead with a sigh, trying to recapture his own mind as his world felt like it was crumbling to dust. Fuck. Why did I even think of it? He murmured as he took a deep breath in and sighed.
"Jason!"
Ranald called loudly as he saw him run by, dressed in silver and gold. The man turned his head and almost fell over as he turned his gaze towards the king and stopped dead in his tracks. "Yes, my lord," Jason asked curiously. His voice sounded hoarse and dry, like he had been running on fumes before. He glanced around while he waited on the king's order. The king hesitated for a bit before he asked, "I need you to stand guard over my children for the coming years. You will be compensated 5 times what you currently get, and I will help with your family's needs, if it is what you need as well." Jason stared aghast to the request, standing still in silence, trying to figure out if the king was making a quip with him. "Did someone cut your tongue, boy?" the king asked, with raised eyebrows as he waited on his answer. Jason shook his head and chuckled uncomfortably. No, sire. I would gladly take it. Gladly." The king nodded and gave a slight smile while patting his shoulder. Yet in truth, behind the mask that he wore, only worry and pain roamed within his mind. "Good. Meet me tomorrow at noon at my estate," the king ordered. Jason nodded. "I will not disappoint you, sire." The king chuckled as he watched him turn around and run up the stairs. Yet as soon as he vanished from his view, he clenched his fist and asked, "How the fuck are people this foolish to order death on my fucking children?" He whispered to himself as he turned towards the wall and punched it with great force. Anger only fueled his rage at this point, but he had to hide it behind a great facade if he wanted to be seen as a worthy leader. If he did not, then the folk would only worsen their antics. "Need to speak with Errant," he said to himself as he turned and walked down the hall, noticing people staring unsubconsciously as he walked by. Yet Ranald did not pay attention to it, as he had only one thing on his mind: his daughters, Lucia and LaRose.